Hello all and welcome to RiskScout's panel webinar, BSA Breakthrough, How Banks Are Upgrading Compliance in 2025. We are so excited to have you all joining us here today. Now, before we do dive into today's panel content, let's roll through some quick housekeeping items. RiskScout will be sharing out all of today's webinar resources, including the slides, the handouts that you can find in your go-to control panel now, and the recording of today's session in a follow-up email, so be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. We also want this session to be as valuable for you as possible, so we encourage you to ask any questions that you might have throughout the session for our panelists in the questions section of the webinar panel on the side of your screen. We'll also be running a poll question towards the end of the webinar to better understand you all, our audience, so your participation is greatly appreciated. Today's webinar will be moderated and led by Justin Fischer, RiskScout CEO and co-founder. Justin has over 23 years of financial technology experience with a heavy focus on community financial institutions, scale, and user experience. Before RiskScout, he served in various executive roles with Q2 eBanking, including Senior Vice President of Operations, where he scaled towards their successful IPO in 2014. Justin is also a certified anti-money laundering specialist. And without further ado, I will get out of the way here and go ahead and pass the baton over to Justin to dive into today's panel. Justin, take it away for us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ethan. That's a great intro. I appreciate you all joining us today, whether it's live here or ultimately on the recording. If Ethan will take us through the next slide, we're going to dive into why we started RiskScout and what we do. And, you know, the first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about who we are. You already heard me, which is great. I don't have to do that part of it. I've worked with a lot of institutions over a couple decades, but our whole team is really, really great. We have ex-examiners from the OCC, from the Fed. Almost everyone you're going to speak to in customer success and product is going to have some level of BSA background, including Kristen, who's been a BSA officer for almost 20 years now. And those are some of the companies and logos that we've been involved in prior. This is a small taste of our clients here at the bottom. Really, the thing to highlight here is I just really love working with Main Street institutions. A little side story that wasn't in my background is that we're a fourth-generation farm family. And so prior to ever getting into any technology, my experience with community financial institutions was our small farm getting loans during the tough times, right? You know, when weather's not cooperating. And it wasn't from Bank of America and Wells Fargo. It was from community institutions like these and like you know, hopefully the attendees that are on today. And so, you know, one of the other things to note here is that we work with institutions that are as small as de novo all the way up to, you know, 8 billion and greater. So, you know, we love focusing and working on the smaller institutions, and we love the feedback. Next slide. So why are we all here? Why do we do what we do? Well, first of all, BSA AML fraud is a very tough topic. A lot of people don't realize that financial institutions in the US were spending less than $28 billion just prior to the pandemic. And that number in 2023 was $61 billion. This comes from the Lexis Cost of Compliance Survey. It hasn't come out yet. They did it already, but it hasn't come out for publishing, but we think it's going to be over 70 billion. That's 70 billion spent on about 80% of it on people, not as much technology. And so, you know, there are a lot of still underutilized or understaffed teams in BSA AML. Last year's fines number was 4.3 billion. And if you study the regulatory stuff like I do, yes, I'm a big nerd on the consent orders. You know, a big chunk of that was TD, who've also had to hire 650 BSA officers to remediate. But what you might not realize is there's still another almost half of that was other institutions. And sometimes, you know, I get an institution that comes to me and they go, well, I'm small and I have the FDIC, I don't have anything to worry about. Well, the smallest institution that got hit in the recent consent orders was 25 million in assets. So the point is that there is no sitting on our laurels and saying, well, what we did last year is going to be fine, or the year before even. What we did is going to be fine. We don't need to have a focus on BSA AML. And by the way, a lot of times I do this slide to CEOs at institutions and board of directors. So, you know, it's big for me to tell them that this is but even a growing issue, and the sophistication of fraud and financial crime is a big deal. Next slide. This is where I usually interrupt my main picture, my main slideshow when I'm on the road to do a PSA about the BSA officer. And one of the things that I find all too often is that it's just a very neglected position or perspective. Yeah, you might get some reporting into the board and get some visibility, but this is a really tough role. And I know this because our primary BSA officer, Kristen, would tell me stories about working at her $4 billion institution that she would have a notepad by her bed and wake up in the middle of the night in sweats and write down, essentially her nightmare of what she was trying to protect the institution from and had forgotten to do or maybe needed to do the next day. That really motivates us every day to provide really practical and affordable software and technology so that, you're not having to worry about having, limited resources or fighting these trends. But, above the surface, you're going to have situations like, of course, money laundering, examiner pressure, and additional fraud. But below the surface, you're going to have situations where most of the technology in the space is pretty outdated. You've got data issues. A lot of times the technology vendors are pointing fingers at the core and putting you in the middle. And, it's just a really challenging space. And so, what you'll hear from RiskScout is that we are working to solve this. And hopefully what you'll hear from our customers is that we're actually doing what we say. And that's the most important thing to me as a CEO. And this is my baby. So, I really want to make sure we're doing what we say we do, and that is being seen. In terms of our system, and we're not going to talk a lot about this today, I'll show you a few slides at the end, but we really want to get into the panels and the really great bankers that have joined us today. But, we are a BSA AML platform at its core. So that includes, advanced risk scoring, transaction monitoring, fully integrated case management, direct SAR and CTR filing, or if you like to do batch, we can do that as well. 314A and due diligence. But one of the really cool things is we didn't start necessarily in BSA. We actually had a platform that was built for higher risk customers. So we still have a lot of institutions and going forward that want to work with up to 50 different types of new markets like cannabis, crypto, HRBs, banking as a service, just as a few examples. MSBs are also very popular, maybe even NRAs, cash intensives. So those are things that you can, and those are things that regulators are scrutinizing more. Those are things that you can add on our system to monitor them in a different way. And we also have a direct client communication platform. So a good example is, say you have a wire and you don't know why they were sending this wire and you need to send something out. Well, you're not going to pick up the phone and identify yourself in most cases as a BSA officer. With RiskScout, you can use our front end tools that send out requests and allow them to respond even on a mobile phone and say, oh yeah, no, I did the wire. No, I didn't do the wire. Help me with that. And you can deal with those things with more of a front office system. And finally, people always ask me, well, where do you fit in the organization? Well, we replace legacy BSA systems like Verifin, BAM Plus, FCRM, Yellowhammer, and so on. But also, we have a third-party data system that allows us to bring in data from some of the best data brokers in the country on a more business or consumer approach where you don't have to pay a large monthly fee. So if you're using sort of a LexisNexis or TR Clear, you can utilize our system for the same type of, maybe even better type of reviews and monitoring. But also, we do full business formation and other levels of business monitoring. And then also third-party data like cannabis licenses, crypto, MSB, that sort of thing. All right, so now we get to go into introductions. So I'm going to first introduce the two institutions that are represented today, and then I'll jump into the people. So one of the institutions we have is Twin City Bank. Twin City began operations in Longview, Washington in April of 2000, focused on serving small and medium businesses in their community. Twin City is just under $100 million in assets, and they leverage IBT as a core. We wanted to explain their core and their specifics of these institutions. But we'll get to the people from Twin Cities here in a second. And then Signature is a privately held Illinois state charter bank founded in 2006. As a relationship-based commercial bank, Signature focuses on providing a personal touch for its customers. And it has over $2 billion in assets, and they are operating on a Jack Henry Silver Lake core. Prior to using RiskScout, Signature Bank used Jack Henry's Yellowhammer as their BSA solution. All right, on the Twin City side, and you guys can turn on your cameras here when you're ready, but I've got Judy Bartlett. She's the CEO, and Judy is a seasoned banking professional with 26 years of experience in the financial industry. Over the past 14 years at Twin City, Judy has served as the BSA Officer, Chief Compliance Officer, and Chief Operations Officer and Compliance Officer, demonstrating expertise in regulatory compliance, risk management, and operational leadership. What I really have to just highlight on Judy is you very rarely see a very strong head of BSA or chief compliance officer go to the CEO position. And kudos to you, Judy. You're a great leader, and it's amazing to see your institution promote you there. And we're so happy for you. And then I have Kyle Eberts. He is a BSA analyst, works with Judy. Kyle's been with Twin City Bank for the past 7 years, beginning as a customer service representative. And now he serves as the bank's BSA analyst, assisting in all aspects of the bank's BSA and AML programs. But one of the things you might not know is that even though Twin City is a little bit smaller on the asset side, they have a very robust cannabis program, and Kyle assists with that program and helps to drive that revenue for the institution. And we have Megan Pavlinek from Signature Bank. She is the VP and BSA Officer. Megan Pavlinek is the Vice President and BSA Officer at Signature Bank, where she has handled all things AML for the past 3 years in Chicago. Megan has over 20 years of banking experience with roles ranging from managing operations and BSA AML fraud for a small community bank to serving as a financial crimes investigator at Fifth Third Bank. So thank you, Judy, Kyle, and Megan for joining us today. We're going to jump into some questions. You guys ready? Excellent. So the first theme that we're going to ask you about, and we're really interested to help the attendees here learn more about when they're thinking about what their program looks like and, evaluating, solutions for that. And, without technology, a lot of solutions are just people, right? Having to hire more people. So we would really like to pick your brain a little bit on the challenges that you were facing with your previous system or your manual processes. So I'm going to start with Megan on this. What were the challenges you were facing, prior to working with us? Oh, we need to activate Megan's microphone there. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I think my biggest challenge was having a vendor that was going to fix errors, right? So I used my core processors system, yet, they're a larger company. They're not going to fix anything within Yellowhammer. They have been trying to roll out a new system for several years now, and they just can't hit the mark. But in the meantime, they're not correcting deficiencies within Yellowhammer. So we kind of, it's an antiquated system. It's probably one of the oldest systems out there, one of the first systems created for monitoring. And, a lot has changed since they built that system, and we need something that works better. Also, Jack Henry, everything is done outside of the system. So you monitor in one system, doesn't have true case management in there. You can't attach files. It's a very clunky system, if you will. And the filing SARs, CTRs, that all happens outside the system. There's obviously like 314A. We have to download files in there, but it's a cumbersome process to do all those things. So we were really looking for something where everything can be done in the system. Everything is all together. I can pull in data. I can write notes. I can create a case. And then also the reporting. When examiners come, auditors come, it's like piecemeal, trying to grab information from core, grab information from our doc system in core, and then the little bit of reporting I can get out of Yellowhammer. And a lot of the files I keep are all manual to give to my auditors and examiners, because Yellowhammer just couldn't provide what I needed to give to them and show them a picture. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, is everything was too spread out. I needed something that brought it all together. And we get a lot of noise. I mean, the alerting, we weren't, not even 1% of what we got was actionable items out of the system. So that's what drove that for us.
Megan, that's great. And I can say, as a software professional who's been at big companies with longer standing software, without mentioning any of those names myself, it takes a lot to have to rebuild the system, or even just to add to something. So that can be really tough. And so I'll shoot it over to the Twin City folks. What were some of the things you guys were dealing with? You had a tracking system too, but you also had manual processes and things you had to deal with as well, right?
A lot of that involved customer data collection. Some of that was because of our cannabis program here, where we're constantly having to collect revenue statements, updated license information, and things like that. And because of that, we had several different resources and platforms that we were using. And so having to go in every day and open up umpteen windows and programs every day was a bit of a hassle, and trying to juggle all of that, making sure that nothing was getting missed. So we were really looking for something that could consolidate everything into a one-stop shop where we could do our transaction monitoring, our high-risk customer monitoring, reviews, CTRs, SARs, everything all in one. And it all was in an easily accessible place that communicated with itself.
So Kyle, just a bonus question on that. How did the customers take to receiving these requests versus the manual way that you did it before?
Honestly, I think they appreciate not hearing from me every month. It comes in emails and they've adjusted to it very well, especially with the customers that we've onboarded since implementing RiskScout. That's the only relationship they have with us at that point, and I've had zero to minimal complaints about any of that. It's been smooth.
I'll jump in here for a moment. We really needed a system that would speed up the processes for us. We're a small bank. Kyle and I are the only ones that monitor all the cannabis. We couldn't do that without RiskScout.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Megan, what were the things you were looking at, sort of key priorities when you're evaluating different solutions?
So a couple of I won't name the names, but some of the big players out there, I demoed those at, previous banks. So I knew what they had to offer. Obviously, I did an updated demo, but they weren't going to cut it, and their pricing, is become astronomical, and for smaller institutions, and also we don't have a very large high risk base. So for us to pay for, some of those systems, they have great things, right? But like real-time fraud monitoring, it's only as good as the person that can look at it every day. We don't, or on an ongoing basis throughout the day. We don't have that staffing, right? So that's great that it offers it, but I don't need that feature because I can't use that feature. So a lot of the features they offered weren't things that we needed. So I had already known what they would do, and I was looking for a vendor that was going to be responsive. Honestly, that was the biggest thing with me. I have followed RiskScout for a few years now because of someone who I had seen on a webinar, Kristen, and I just kind of kept up with her and followed her for the last few years because I knew that this was a vendor I could work with if one day I had a need for your program, and then you built a program I needed before I needed your high risk program. So the minute I heard that you guys were building this, I already knew, hey, I think this is going to be a good fit because I knew the vendor would be a good fit. The software behind it, is great, but software is software, and if you don't have a good team to work with to make that software work for your bank and to correct things and map things and change things, the software is of no use to you. So if the software is if you don't have a vendor that works with you. So that was my biggest thing. I knew if I could find a good vendor, that the software will come together if we work together.
That's really good to hear. One of my big pet peeves is we don't actually like the V word. We don't want to be just a vendor. We really want to be a partner, but you guys hear that all the time, and you don't always see that in the commitment. No. And honestly, I feel like maybe we should bring Kristen on for an hour and just sing her praises, her and her team. She's so good, and you can tell how much she's committed, and we as a team are committed to making these solutions work well for you and are affordable. But Kyle, I want to throw that question over to you, Kyle or Judy. What were the key priorities for evaluating solutions for you?
It was just the flexibility of everything. One of my biggest gripes with one of our prior platforms we were using is just how inflexible it was. I had a ticket I placed in with them to improve the way a certain report was formatted because they had sunset a previous report that used to work. And that ticket is still open. I placed that ticket back in July of last year. And I can see the grass grow faster than the progress being made in that old platform. So, but if I had placed a similar ticket with RiskScout, I have no doubt you guys fixed it within a week. It's just so adaptable to how niche our platform is. And the way I've seen RiskScout be developed is it fits and customizes to whatever anybody needs for their institution. Not everybody, especially when you compare it to us and our institution size, is going to need specifically what we need. But RiskScout's adaptable enough that it can be applied to their situation.
Yeah, I gotta quote Kristen here. She has this famous theme that she says, with most other systems, and this is what she was told as a BSA officer, is you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. That's Kristen, you know, what she heard. And we're trying to be the opposite of that. We're trying to be able to customize. Obviously, we want to give you best practices, but you know, there are things that are very specific to your risk thresholds and what you're doing. I mean, not everybody's doing cannabis, and you know, there's the things that you have to have some flexibility for. Just one last question here on this section, Megan. Do you have any advice for bankers that are beginning their search for a new BSA AML tool?
Yeah, I mean, big names are great, but find a vendor that's going to work for you. I mean, I have to say there was, you know, initially a little pushback from management when I said, hey, I want to go with this vendor. And they said, oh, what about, so, you know, this other vendor, that's the one everybody talks about. And I'm like, yep. And it is going to be absolutely useless for us. So I think that is, you know, the biggest advice is to, you know, I mean, big names again are great. But I have a lot of peers I know that have gone with those big names, or their bank went with those big names, and now they're moving off of them. They don't, just a big name. So I'd say, again, I go back to find a team that you're comfortable with, whoever it is. But I think the vendor, the team that you're going to work with is the most important part.
Thank you, Megan. We're going to change themes a little bit into using the system in action, so RiskScout in action. And I want to talk about, because we touched on this, Kyle and Judy, can you guys talk a little bit more about what makes you guys unique? You know, why do you need that flexibility? And, you know, sounds like cannabis is one of those things, but maybe you can touch on what those things are about your institution.
So a lot of that involves having a much higher review threshold and SAR reporting threshold because of those cannabis requirements. And so every month we're having to go in and monitor customer revenue income against account credits for each and every customer. We're having to monitor licenses and negative news on a much more stringent basis than you would with a more traditional high-risk customer portfolio there. There's a lot more transaction monitoring that is involved in that too, because we're having to monitor for structuring or more traditional money laundering in that sense there. But RiskScout's been fantastic because it covers all of that all in one place. And it saves me so much time when it comes to getting information from our customers as well. RiskScout's got this great ability where you can send out requests for information from your customers and they can respond in a secure channel, and it all gets added right to their file in RiskScout. All your communications can be saved. We're able to send out what we call checkpoints, which is kind of like a wellness check for the customer at regular intervals there, and they can upload reports, provide tax returns, or whatever other information we would need from them on a regular basis. And it's all automated. I schedule it once and it goes out like clockwork, and I never have to worry about scheduling another appointment again. And then if I need to turn it off, I go and I click one button and it turns off what I need. It is fantastic.
All of which we were doing manually prior.
And you guys utilize the applications. Right, yeah, lots of spreadsheets in BSA. Y'all use the applications, right, for new customers, so you can evaluate any new cannabis or high-risk customers that come in as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it's automated our application process as well.
Yeah, our new account time frame is significantly down. We can open an account almost as fast as the customer gives us their information.
You know, it's a really important thing.
Any high-risk customer.
It's really important because, you know, one of the biggest things, if you read the consent orders for smaller institutions, actually any institution, is this the lack of focus on the high risk evaluation against policy, right? So you have your risk assessments and your procedures and policy, and you go sign a cash intensive. And I don't know about you guys, I did my ACAMs here. I just left at a holiday, and so I'm not a true BSA officer, but you go into a local gas station here in Texas and you're going to find questionable hemp and weed products. You're going to find crypto terminals that are questionable. And you can see the whole thing that happened in Ohio where a guy sold $3 million in fake crypto terminals. You're going to find an ATM that they might be feeding. It's a private ATM, independent ATM. And so, yeah, it's a gas station, but it has other potential things, maybe also wiring money, And so those are things that you have to think about. So one of the things we see is institutions just say, we're not going to bank that. We're not going to bank anything close to an MSB or hemp or what have you. And I actually personally know a lot of hemp farmers here that are just regular farmers. They just sell a product that has a little more scrutiny, right? And so you cannot just bank them and not do the process, have some level of focus. But sometimes other vendors and people in the market will say that you've got to go do, site reviews every week, or you've got to do 20, 30 pages worth of reviews every week. And it's just crazy, the difference. And I can see how sometimes you guys are stuck in between, especially in the cannabis, hemp, and banking as a service world with what am I supposed to do? And then it's always easier if you don't have an automated program to just say, we're not going to do it, right? That's a common thing, is just to be the BSA officer that says no, and the institution can't grow in that space, right? And I don't fault you for that. If you can't automate it, it's a lot of risk you're taking on without being able to. So Megan, tell me a little bit. We talked a little bit about this offline and quite a lot in our relationship, but there's a challenge that vendors who are not the core, and some that are owned by the core but aren't truly integrated, like part of the core, they tend to get, and for you credit union people, your host, core, same system, right? You tend to have this problem where, they sell you something. Hey, this product's going to work. Here's everything it does. I walk all the way down ACAM, saw all these really pretty pictures. But the reality is that the data might not always match that, right? And there are challenges to get, tran codes right, the data connected. But we are always going to have those challenges as well. I want to be really clear to the audience. But what matters, and I want to know your perspective on this, is how was it working with RiskScout when it came to some of those things?
So we're still, we're mapping everything in now, but there's still things we're working on, but they're working with me. So I see it getting corrected. So one of the challenges I had with my prior system is duplicate cash transactions, meaning, and this is my core processor's program. So this is their program, and they double feed cash deposits, meaning I see the cash deposit as a straight deposit, and I also see it as cash. And they had to do that in order to be able to provide structuring alerts to me. But then I see it so if I pull a customer history for 3 months, I then have to sort and take out the deposit one, right? And just keep the cash, or one or the other. I mean, they're duplicating a transaction. And they just wouldn't fix it. So right now, I know, currently we're waiting for a file from my core processor to send over to RiskScout so that RiskScout can stop. But RiskScout's already figured out a way to make that not duplicate for me. But it's just a matter of getting the right files over from my core processor, right? So, yeah. So I think it's things like that. Like I said before, finding the vendor that's going to work with you. I mean, this is something that it's their own product, and they were like, we're just not going to fix it. It is what it is. So I think those were challenges. There were some other tran code issues in the system, just tran codes feeding in that weren't a true representation of what that transaction was. And I'm like, oh, well, we need to change the description. No, we're not making any changes to that system anymore. And you're kind of like, okay, wire detail, non-existent. We don't get, if I want details on wires, I have to go to I call them green bar reports, but like the original reports feeding in. I can't get that on my monitoring system. So what's the point of having it on there if I have to stop and go outside the system to find the detail on it when I'm trying to, investigate something or look at something that maybe is a little bit different than that customer normally does. Again, if I have to keep going to outside sources to get information, then my monitoring system is not working for me.
Yeah, and a big part of what you just said is that generally the reaction from a vendor, even outside of the BSA AML space, is go fix your data, Megan. It's your data.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I've done 300 core conversions through my time at Q2 and other places, and on my side, vendor side, not one of them was clean. There was
No.
always something that was like, oh, remember when we, like hotwired those Christmas Club accounts back in 2004? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff just kind of pops up, and hopefully it's not showing someone accounts that they shouldn't see, but that stuff happens. And I think the most important thing is that, at least at RiskScout, our philosophy is not to put you in the middle, right? Because that's where you generally get inserted between the core and the vendor. It's pointing fingers.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't done any. I mean, RiskScout's communicating directly with Jack Henry. I haven't, aside from when I put the very first tickets through months ago when we onboarded. I just had to initiate that I wanted Jack Henry to feed information over to RiskScout, and once that happened, I haven't talked to Jack Henry since then, and that is a huge win for me because it was not always a fun process.
What about you guys, Kyle, Judy, in terms of that same kind of question? When, look, I want to talk about when we have issues, because it's not like a vendor's not going to have issues, right? A partner's not going to have issues. That might be weird. But what are been the experience with you guys when we worked with IBT?
I mean, it's been pretty seamless from my end of everything here. You guys have been so willing and ready and able to take whatever feeds are necessary or build them out as necessary. There's been very little, if any, hiccups. I remember back when we first had transaction feeds established for revenue tracking with you guys, and this was a couple of years ago even, there was maybe one or two hiccups, and it was as simple as having our core resend the file. And there was very little, if anything, I think we ever actually had to do to correct that. RiskScout's been great as far as building around our unique situation, because our wires don't feed into our old BSA system. So they're working on a way now where that feeds in automatically, and we wouldn't even have to worry about that. Or even building in feeds for cash vault scenarios where there's an armored courier that would pick up deposits and run the cash in a separate location, where we wouldn't even have to upload transaction files anymore. Those files would just get fed right into RiskScout, and it automates everything at that point. So.
One of the nice things about RiskScout is no matter what we ask you to do, even if it sounds crazy, you never tell us no.
That is true.
And you always come back with a solution, and it generally makes everything better.
I want to hit on that really quick. We not only took all the feedback from both of y'all on this, from both of you guys, we also did interviews with 200 BSA officers across the board, institutions all the way up to 20 billion, and just try to understand what were the common problems. And I know some of the newer systems that have been developed haven't really done that, and it might be great to get the latest and greatest in a specific type of feature, but if you still have to load your domestic wires you back in because they keep showing up as international wires every day, those are the pains that you live with, right? That's a real example with one of the other systems. And so that's important to us, is to listen and go. Now, I will say, Judy, and us, to say that we always want to understand the problem. We won't always necessarily solve the solution the way you think it might be solved. We want to solve it in the best way that works with your data and the process. And it's a partnership, right? What works best for you? What can we do with your data? And how do we make that good for everybody? That's how the process works. We want to make sure you're happy and it's solved. That's the main thing. Real quick on the, just on the core side quickly, we talked a little bit about IBT and Jack Henry. Just so you know, RiskScout's also partners with DCI, FIS, a number of the other cores, Finastra, Shazam. So, if you're, or the credit union cores as well, Scimitar and so forth. So you are working on those cores. Again, we try to work directly with those cores and work with you so that it's not a big process. So lots of core support there. And last question in this section, I'm going to give it to both you guys. Give it over to Kyle and Judy real quick. What are the unexpected benefits that you have seen since implementing RiskScout?
I mean, that's an easy one for me here. With Judy being promoted here, there's been more that's been placed on my plate as far as assisting with the overall BSA and AML program here. And as the as I've been integrated into RiskScout's BSA platform, I've gotten a much deeper and thorough understanding of how that program works. RiskScout's been great as far as instructing on this is how the platform can be customized to fit your risk appetite and your institution's risk profile, as far as transaction monitoring, customer risk ratings, and that's going to help me when it comes to exams. Examiners have had great things to say about RiskScout whenever we've had our audits or our exams in the last few months or years, even as long as we've been with RiskScout. They think it's a fantastic program to implement. So
Agreed.
yeah, rave reviews.
Thank you.
Can you,
yeah, can you guys talk just a little bit quickly about one of the things we're trying to pride ourselves on is not being overcomplicated. I've got a friend who's a BSA officer of a $4 billion institution, and they bought the latest and greatest machine learning system, and they went from 20 alerts a month to 1,000 alerts every day, and they come out of a black box. So they went from 20 with an idea of where they came from, you know, and just so you know, I am a technologist, so I'm a big ML nerd and AI, and we do implement some of those models. I just think sometimes what happens is that there's this, hey, this is the better system, but then the end result is that, you know, I don't know about you, but if you now have 1,000 alerts a day, you're not getting to them. And then if you have to go in front of the examiner and explain, hey, it's just impossible for me to get to them, I think there are a lot of false positives. They're going to say, how do you know? How do you know it's not a true positive, right? And so I'm just curious how you guys think of, you know, risk, you know, kind of all around risk scoring, transaction monitoring, the case management system. How practical has it been for you? How easy has it been for you to understand?
It's been easy. I got to phrase this correctly here. It's a matter of making it streamlined enough where an examiner looking at an alert, for example, gets the who, what, the where, when, what, and being able to get that out of an alert so you can properly investigate it, clear it, escalate it, whatever needs be. That's been critical, and RiskScout's been really good about implementing and drilling down to those key details and data points that you need, making it accessible and visible right when you click on the page. I'm not having to click on other pages, open other tabs or anything. I get all the information I need right there to accomplish the task at hand, and then I move right on to the next one.
Excellent. So Megan, one last question in the action section here. How is your institution unique or different, and how has RiskScout worked with that?
So I'd say the unique part would be the data feeds coming from different sources. So for instance, our wire reports are a little bit unique. They come from several sources. One is our core, but then we have a couple of other for international. We have just a weird setup, and RiskScout's, you know, working with that. And again, goes back to the fact that as long as I can get them the data, like as long as I can say, here's where you get it, you guys just start pulling it, and I don't have to do anything. I'm just like, here you go, here's your permission to take it, and they're just going to take it. We actually just got a new online banking platform, Q2 actually. So we had to change we have a different wire process that kind of sits in there from what we had before, and it was happening simultaneously with me onboarding RiskScout. And so I don't quite have the stuff I need from Q2 yet, but you know, we're working on it. But for the meantime, we're feeding in what we can, but like RiskScout knows that's coming. And I think that's another good point, not to sidetrack, is that BSA officer, minimal experience with onboarding, you know, software programs. I am the one doing all this. I don't have any support from my IT team. Not that they wouldn't support me, but we are going through an online banking conversion. I just didn't want to wait until they were going to be available to onboard RiskScout. I didn't want to wait. And the only reason I was comfortable doing that was because I knew that RiskScout was going to do, I guess, what I call the heavy lifting for me. Because if you guys weren't, I wouldn't be able to do this by myself. If I had to go back and forth between, you know, and trying to get reports and work with Jack Henry and get stuff to you guys and, you know, do all this mapping, if I had to investigate too much and put too much into it, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm doing this on my own, no help from IT, no support from my business systems, which normally those are the people that would work on all the system stuff. You know, there's other teams that do that. I'm doing it on my own. So I think that is, again, a testament to the team there, that, you know, a BSA officer who has no IT experience is able to implement a new software program without any help from IT.
Yeah. So just for the audience too, our typical platform deployments, so we actually can deploy the main platform in about 2 business days, which we've had some institutions go and do EDD reviews within 2 weeks. Obviously, with BSA data, we need the data from the core. Some of our cores work as fast as 2 weeks. Some of them take a little longer than that, but we average, a 60 to 90-day implementation, and that includes sort of a parallel training process. So and we also highly recommend running an overlap with your existing system, so we can help you to kind of make sure that you're seeing what you want to see and that the processes overlap. So we can work in other scenarios, but that's our typical process to share. And I know you guys were both beta, so y'all worked with us for a little longer to test. But we just wanted to quickly end this section, Kyle and Judy. We get a lot of accolades about Kristen and her team and the level of training, and technically, we're not a cannabis specific software, but we do get a lot of questions around cannabis, and cannabis is a gray area at best, different across the states, and hemp as well. We do constantly do retrainings, but I'd like to hear your perspective on how we've been in terms of supporting you from a training and education perspective or answering questions. It may not always just be about the software.
I mean, you guys have been a wonderful resource there. Kristen's phenomenal, so is Ryan. Every member of your team that I've ever spoken with has just been wonderful to work with. You guys are very educated from a very good, diverse background of being in the industry. You guys have historical examiners from the OCC on your staff. You guys know your stuff, and you've built up a wealth of knowledge, and you guys stay current with everything too. Whenever there's a major update, I've asked you guys if you've been on the ball about it, and you guys are already 3 steps ahead of me. So it's been fantastic. If I've ever had a question about the difference between cannabis license specification for Oregon versus Washington, you guys have been able to build out the necessary monitoring for that for each state, because every state has a different program. And it's being able to juggle all of that within your platform has been phenomenal. It's made my job and my life easier. I get more done in a day because of you guys than I could have ever without you. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's
we also bank hemp as well. So the platform's helped with that.
Yeah, we're able to separate the two instead of keeping it all because it's hemp and marijuana is the same plant. It's just different strains of it, of course, but we're able to treat the 2 programs separately, but it's still within RiskScout.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to be really clear. For other institutions, what we typically see is that they have a manual checklist or to-do list, right, for both onboarding and then for EDD review. And what happens is they end up scheduling that on their Outlook or Microsoft 365 calendar, and then they send those things out, and they're not really adaptive. So, I really have to send a 50-page, plant touching cannabis thing to someone who's just doing transport or just doing lab work, right? That's just an example. And so if you take that and multiply that against, again, a cash management, cash intensive business that's not doing wire transfers and all this other stuff, you can have very specific workflows. We call them checkpoints in the system that allow you to customize what kind of business type or person you're dealing with, right? Like on the NRA side, you can set an automatic annual collection for the W-9, and you don't have to send those mailers out. So those are things I think you guys are talking about that we spent a lot of time building that in the first couple of years of the company, but I'm glad it's paying off.
Our customers, cannabis, and we just couldn't monitor that manually anymore. And we wouldn't be able to even onboard that many customers without you guys. It's really sped up our process.
It's made a good revenue stream for us too.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're hoping to help you expand too, so you guys can bring in more revenue in the other states. So we'll talk about that later offline some more. But I want to skip into a look inside. Again, I don't want to be, this is obviously, talking about RiskScout, but I want to show you guys a little bit of the product for those that are joining us that haven't seen our system. So we talked a little bit about, our BSA AML and fraud tools. This is a web-based cloud-hosted system. So again, we set it up with your SSO, so you don't have to have separate logins and credentials. We also set up with your email server, so when we send out anything out to the clients coming from your institution, we train them to not look at anything that says bank that's not your institution. And what we're really proud of ourselves on is building things like RiskScout, which is a pretty standard 3x3 matrix that allows you to look at all the things that you need to look at, and then has additional parameters that we're continuing to update. And then, and again, as well as specifics like cannabis and MSBs and ATM types. And then, the transaction monitoring is really practical. Yes, it's derived from machine models belowhand, but it's also very explainable and easy for institutions to understand how we're doing it. And what we're really excited about are some of the new features we've been rolling out around sandboxing. So being able to test some of your parameters on your rules without having to put them in production and then have to roll them back. That's a constant issue we heard in the interviews. And then in terms of case management, everybody's got a case management system, but where we like to excel is that we built it with an examiner in mind, so that when you have to trace all your steps, including, like, let's say you're working with a high risk customer that's doing an application online. And, I know, Twin Cities, sometimes that can be 60 days, right? It goes back and forth. So, you can see all the logs, what they changed, when they said what they were going to say. And I can't tell you guys enough, if I've learned one thing from examiners is, are you paying attention, right? Are you paying attention to the risk of the customer and whether they changed their type? And how many times, we're a startup software company, right? But if we changed and started, just doing cannabis, our institution probably hadn't talked to us in 3 years, How would they know? And so I think having that kind of traction with the tools and the investigation tools is really important. No one loves to do SAR and CTR filing, but we try to make that pretty painless and direct. And obviously the MRB filings as well, the limited SARs. And then 314A and program reporting, standard parts of our system. So if we go to the next section, one of the things people don't realize about us is that, we talked a lot about cannabis, but we've got institutions that do MSB. They do lots and lots of what I call higher risk businesses, not all high risk, just higher risk than your typical, say, construction business. There's some right there, like ACH originators, art dealers, ATM. Here in Texas, we have Goodwill type of companies that are all cash-based businesses. Well, they're on the border. And so what can commonly happen is that, the cartels and other criminal organizations will funnel money through them, right? And so NRAs, again, foreign nationals and NRAs they're a great source of deposits, but they are a little higher risk than your typical consumer. So those are different types that you can manage based on different frequencies, right? So you can send out a collection for them once a week, once a month, once every quarter. I talked to one institution who has 3,000 high risk businesses, and she's like, we're doing good to have our highest risk ones reviewed every year. She has 30 resources doing it. And she goes, but we want to do some every 6 months, and we just don't know how we're going to do it. You do it with automation. You're not going to do it by hiring another 30 people, because it's probably not allowed. And for those of you running a one-person shop, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're not getting 2 or 3 more people. By the way, vendors also like to say, we are going to replace your BSA officer. We are not saying that. We're saying the opposite. We're here to augment and help you so that you do not have to go and hire 2 or 3 more people for some of the most basic things, right? It's very, very important that these smiley faces that we're seeing here and all of you that are online are what we call human in the loop in the technology world. You have to be a part of this system, and there's just not technology these days that can just be a virtual BSA officer, no matter how many vendors will tell you that they can do that. It's just not a good place to be. So if that starts to come along, or we see some places in AI to do something like a Copilot to do what I do, which is to review all of my consent orders in a custom GPT. We're going to release that for you guys to test and try it out and really be able to support you. But we want your feedback. Is it working? Is it hallucinating? Is it, making more work for you to do? Those are things that people really need to get feedback on in the software space. Otherwise, we're adding more work for you, and I don't think any of you guys want more work to do. So that's definitely the opposite of where we want to go. And then the final thing is that people don't realize this. I think Megan and Judy and Kyle said this, but a lot of people run LexisNexis PR Clear, and I won't really comment about the effectiveness of those tools other than that they are a separate tool to your BSA system typically, and they require separate integrations or just managing 2 panes of glass, right? I got 2 systems I got to watch for. what RiskScout has done is we partnered with companies like Moody's and Middesk and some of the other bigger data companies in the US, in the world actually. And we're able to look up businesses and people associated with businesses for anything from negative news to criminal elements of the negative news, like sanctions, fraud, things like that. And we do this in a couple different ways. We give you a detailed first pass report. We see a lot of our cannabis and high risk businesses use this. This will just give you a real one-shot look at the different risks in this business and maybe things that aren't consistent with what we've looked up with what they've told you, right? And then on an ongoing basis, you can turn on all these monitors at your request. Here's a really important part about a software vendor versus a partner. We have one institution that came to us and said, I want to turn on the monitoring for everybody. I said, hold on a second. You turn on the monitoring for everybody, we have a very low false positive rate, but you're going to have a lot to look at for things that do not require that kind of scope, until they maybe do a SAR or there's something that you want to monitor. And so we would make more money to turn that on, but it would not be the experience the institution wants to see. And that's what's most important to us, is that it's an effective solution and that they're happier overall and not doing more work. So this is a built-in industry data process that you can turn on either at an initial report or an ongoing one. Those are the three tenets of our system. So, BSA AML fraud, new market expansion opportunities, and third-party monitoring. And as the team has told you today, the customers here, it's all in one system. So you don't have to buy a cannabis module or you do the cannabis pieces, but it's all in one place and integrated. So you're not dealing with three different pieces of software. All right,
Excellent.
Ethan.
Well, thank you for that overview. Yeah, sorry to jump in here and interrupt, but Justin, before we do move into Q&A, we do have one quick poll question that we want to share with our audience. That should be popping up on the screen now. RiskScout here, our goal is really to help y'all the same way that we've been able to help organizations like Twin City Bank, Signature, and many more. So if y'all want to take a quick second, look at this question on the screen. It's just asking if there are any areas where you would like to get some assistance from RiskScout, where we can reach out, get in touch, and help y'all out a little bit. We would love to do so. So please check as many or as few of those responses as you'd like. And in the meantime, now is a great time to get those questions in. We are about to shift over to a couple minutes of Q&A here. Some of y'all have already asked some excellent questions, which I appreciate, but while you've got some bankers on the line that have used the platform, that are familiar with RiskScout, this is your opportunity to be able to ask them any questions you may have. If we don't have the chance to answer those questions live on today's call, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the fact, or maybe even get you in touch with one of our panelists here so y'all can have a little conversation offline and get that information that you need. Excellent. So, yes, please.
While you have the poll up, I just want to tell everybody, so Ethan is our great BSA marketing guy, and he's came up with this slogan called taking the BS out of BSA, and we really mean it. The BS is all that extra work you're having to do, that extra price, that renewal price that you're seeing. So we have these really great t-shirts and people love them. I sell out all my koozies and t-shirts giveaways at the conferences. So if you will do a demo with me or our team and give us some feedback about the product, I would absolutely get you guys some shirts. So, I think Megan, you modeling one for us in the slide.
I did. I have one. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd love to get you that stuff, but really what I really love as a product person is to hear your feedback and some of the things that maybe we haven't thought about and that you're looking for. So please take us up on that.
Excellent, great call out. Yeah, I think we might actually have that photo of Megan wearing that shirt maybe coming up here in a slide or two. So and you are, yeah, we'd love to hook you up with one of those shirts. So please go ahead and let us know there. Now, I'll go ahead and close this out and switch over to some of the questions that we had come in. Megan, towards the beginning of the session, you mentioned that when you were evaluating some BSA solutions, you found RiskScout, you knew that you wanted to go with them, but you got a little bit of pushback from your leadership team since they were familiar with maybe some bigger brand legacy BSA solutions. How did you go about convincing them to ultimately go with RiskScout?
So the first thing I told them was that RiskScout was a team of bankers and regulators, and that they were, so we at Signature, we always talk about keeping things simple and try to common sense, right? We don't overcomplicate things. Common sense is very important here. If it doesn't make sense, then why are we doing it? Or why do we need that? And what I told them was, this is a group of common sense bankers and regulators. Now, when I said common sense regulators, they kind of were like, there is no such thing as a common sense regulator, to which I assured them that once they are no longer regulators, then they see common sense again. So that was my biggest thing, was that, and I told them also, I said, this is a company that I can work with and I will be able to do this myself. I am not going to ask you for any resources. And then they couldn't really argue with that. And that's exactly what it's gotten. I mean, I haven't gone to them for anything. I haven't asked for IT resources. I haven't asked for business systems resources. I haven't asked for another person. I said, if you want to keep things the way they are right now, get me this system and you won't hear from me.
That is fantastic. Thank you for that answer. I do think, yeah, we call our former regulators as reformed regulators now that they're on our team. So definitely understand where you're coming from there. Kyle, I've got a question for you as well. You were mentioning recently about how y'all have gained a lot of benefits from separating hemp and cannabis in your system. We had a question come in saying, are those groups things that are predefined? Are they customizable? Justin, maybe you can weigh in there as well.
It's entirely customizable. It can be entirely customizable to whatever program you may need. So for us, they're on different review schedules. The MRBs themselves require a much stricter monitoring program that's much more in-depth, where we're getting much more frequent documentation from the customers. We're not getting that from the hemp customers. We don't need that from them. And so we're able to customize the checkpoints that we're sending out between our hemp customers and our traditional cannabis customers that way. I'm able to turn on or off the revenue tracking. I can have preset different types of alerts that will generate. That's also something there. So no, I can craft it whatever way I need it to be. It's been super easy, and whatever resources I need as far as like instructions on how to set things up, RiskScout's been great on developing how-tos. I know Kristen's working on that, and I'm in touch with her constantly about, hey, how can I make this work? Let's fine-tune this to make it more of exactly what I'm looking for. And they've been great to work with on that.
I'll just add quickly that a lot of institutions ask us about whether they're, when you say customizable, do I have to build all these things? And the good news is I'd say 90% of our FIs just take the templates we have out of the box, and we're continually updating them. But if you want to take them and customize them to something you're doing or your state or something that's more specific, that's always an option. So it's pretty easy for us to duplicate and create one custom for you.
Well said. Well, I know we're coming up on our time here. So I did want to go around and ask, I'm curious for our panelists here, if y'all had to close out by leaving one piece of advice for anyone that's on the call, anyone that might be about to set out on a journey looking for a new BSA solution, what do you wish you had known when you were starting your journey? Megan, I'll start with you.
Wish I had known. I think I already knew it. I wanted a vendor I knew I could trust and that I could work with. That was my biggest piece. And again, this just goes back to been doing this for 20 years and working with vendors in this space for 20 years and having not the greatest experiences. That was my number one thing. And I think I had resolved myself that I was just always going to have to deal with these difficult vendors that are non-responsive. And then I found RiskScout and I was like, okay, this is a company I can work with. So I think if I can give advice, I'd definitely find the vendor that's going to work for you or work with you.
That's great. Judy, what about you? Do you have any advice for any BSA officers that might be on the call?
I would look at RiskScout first.
I would agree there. If you ever have a new idea or you're looking to implement something new into your program, RiskScout is able to take that idea and run the extra mile with it. We've been able to develop new ways to innovate our monitoring program, and RiskScout's been able to implement ways that they can accommodate that as well. For example, we've developed a way to do our site visits remotely now, where RiskScout is able to store the video call files for us. We couldn't do that in our prior system, but that's something that we found we could do in RiskScout. Whatever crazy ideas we have, they can work with that. too.
Yeah, I was manually going to all of the locations and doing the site visits, where it's a cost savings for us. We don't have the mileage, we don't have the time out of the office. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That's excellent. Thank you both so much for that. That's great, great advice, great way for us to end here. Now, that is all of the time that we do have today. We'll leave you with this image. There's Megan showing off that BSA, or take the BS out of BSA shirt that Justin mentioned. We would love to also set y'all up with one of these shirts as well. So please feel free to either use this QR code, or you can always find us at RiskScout.com. We'd love to get one out to you and spend some time talking through how maybe we can help out your financial institution as well. So I really want to give a big, big thank you to our panelists, to Judy, to Kyle, to Megan for sharing both their time and expertise with us. Please be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. We will be sending out today's recording, slides, and resources from the session. That will be in your inbox ready for you tomorrow morning. There will also be a brief survey after this. We love to get feedback on how our webinars are going, things that we can do to improve and change, and maybe even future topics that you'd love to hear from us about. So please take a moment with that and share your thoughts. If you do have any additional questions, if you want to learn more about RiskScout, or if you just want to say hi to any of our smiling faces, please come and visit us at RiskScout.com. We hope to see you again, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, thank you.